everyone for the second showcase this afternoon. We're going to hear about iWalk, video testimony-based local history walks with a mobile app. And I think for all of us from the European continent, this is quite a used concept, of the concept that we've been encountering over the years. A lot regarding Holocaust history from Australia or the United States. It is often used for other topics than Holocaust history, but I just learned there are also iWalks in the US and Canada. I'll be introducing our speakers in a moment. I just want to do some housekeeping before. There are a couple of things to test, to try. So take the time to go to the different buildings, to go to the VR experiences, the games occur, to the exhibition hall, and also to the film and VR screenings. And the organizers would love delegates to post and share about the expo on social media and hopefully tag them. And they would be grateful if you could give them your feedback via the QR codes on the two screens in the Jubilee. Quick housekeeping, and now we go over to our speakers. Dr. Monica Mazzei and Gabriella Comoli from the Shoah Foundation. Dr. Monica Mazzei is the educational content developer and trainer at Shoah Foundation and has a background in education. She gained her MA and PhD at University Budapest as a secondary school teacher of history and Latin language, and she spent over 20 years in the classroom, so you've been seeing quite a lot of students over the years. She's the author of several educational materials and as a trainer has contributed to several national and international training programs. Gabriella Comoli, head of international and research programs at Shoah Foundation, is a sociologist and has her MA degree in Jewish Studies and Nationalism Studies from the Central European University. She also has a BA and is completing her second MA in psychology at University in Budapest, and her field of interest revolves around personal testimonies and narrative interviews. They will also have us working, so we now have a few minutes to listen in, but don't get too used to it. We'll be put to work as well.
Yeah. So since we are presenting a mobile application, we should prepare your mobile applications, not now, but we'll see. Just have this in mind. So welcome everybody, and thank you for being here. And I'm very excited to share this with you, because we have very interesting news and future perspectives with the iWalk application. Who we are and what we do, just a very brief introduction. As you heard, we come from Budapest, from Shoah Foundation, which is an educational NGO. It was founded in 2007. And what we do is we put the importance of remembrance in the perspective, and we work with personal testimonies, we work with personal stories. In the beginnings, these were written testimonies of survivors, and we published some books, and you can find those in the exhibition area as well. And then it just evolved into something more digital and something more accessible for people and for students alike. So we developed teaching materials which build on the testimonies of the archive of the USC Shoah Foundation, and this is where these two organizations come together, and we will hear a bit more about the collection of the testimonies that we use in our work. So this is what is the basis of our operation, and we have a huge emphasis on teacher training programs because we reach the students through the teachers, and that's very important for us, and we work very closely with these teachers, nationally and internationally as well. Internationally through our partnerships, but nationally we have, we call it an ambassador network of teachers in Hungary, and this is really the way to spread the knowledge, because they are the best in their region. They know what their people need, what their colleagues need, what their students need. So this is how we work. And we have a lot of programs. Today we are only focusing on the iWalk program, which is local, historical, digital educational program. But how this all began, so we were focusing a lot on peer guiding and student programs as well. And what we did is we were leading these guided walks in the old Jewish district of Budapest, which included the visit of the synagogue. It's super impressive, and the whole history of the Jewish district in Budapest is very rich. But the focus was on the peer guiding element. So we were preparing the students to be able to deliver a super exciting walking tour to their peers. And these were actually 17-year-olds leading the other 17-year-olds in the old Jewish district, and it was really nice. But they grew up, and then, you know, it was, okay, we have new ones, but the old ones are really good, but, you know, they are now 35-something old people leading these youngsters. And in the meantime, we also started to work with the testimonies, and we realized that this should somehow be able to reach more people and should be able to live on its own. So we started to include the testimonies into these walks, first on iPads, and then it later became the iWalk application. But the idea originally came from these peer-guided tours, and then the fact that we don't have enough human resources, and we also probably not only want to show them the old Jewish district, but several other locations. So how do these testimonies come into the picture?
Yeah, so we are going back to the iWalk in several minutes, but about the testimonies, we use the video history archive of the Shoah Foundation of the University of Southern California. This foundation is funded by Steven Spielberg. I'm sure that you are familiar with his work and with his person, because he and his colleagues recorded full life history interviews with people who and whose history was the basis of his film, The Schindler's List. But after that, he realized that these testimonies are very important sources, historical sources. So the Shoah Foundation now collects many other types of survivor stories, not only the Holocaust, but you can see on the slide the Armenian genocide or Guatemala and so on. I won't read them aloud, you can see them. And the original video testimonies were recorded on tape, so later they were digitalized. There were search indexing words created for them, because these interviews takes 4 hours or 3 hours, so very long, most of them. It can be very difficult to listen to all of them. And now you can see that almost 70,000 indexing words you can find or you can search with. And of course, our life is not long enough to listen to all of these testimonies, which is pity, because they are very, very interesting, but that's how it works, unfortunately. So we can use this collection for researching, but our organization, our foundation, use these testimonies for teaching, for educating youngsters and people. Of course, these testimonies are very rich and very valuable, precious historical sources, but they belong to the oral history department. So as a historian, I have to say that we sometimes have to be careful of how to use them, and we have to teach the students as well what an oral history source means and what is the difference between an oral history source or other kind of source. But which is most important, that they are very precious sources in terms of pedagogy, because we can teach the students many, many things we cannot teach or not so effectively using other kind of sources. I think that we will speak about this aspect as well later. These interviews as full life history interviews contains many biographical data, of course, social and the historical context of the events. The interviewees speak about their life before the Holocaust or the other genocide, during the genocide and after the genocide. So we can use them for every topic what comes to our mind, honestly. So we don't have to use them for teaching the Holocaust or to other genocides. It can be important when we would like to use these testimonies with smaller children, so we can. These personal data are very important if we look at them as microhistory. So we know, and our students can learn the macro history from the textbook, but it is a very interesting addition from the point of view of the actual people who went through these historical periods. And we can get to know many very interesting personal facts, names of family members who died during the genocide, and maybe they don't have any other traces in life, only this testimony when somebody say their name. Or other local history elements, and that's the point when we can go back to the iWalk, how we can use these testimonies during a historical tour.
The switch so you
Yeah,
don't get
you
bored.
know.
So these elements of the local historical elements are the things why we thought that it is very interesting and important to connect the actual location to a story that is behind. And this is especially relevant when you go to places where you live. For example, you live in a small town and you go to school every day and you pass the same buildings, and then you don't know anything about it, and then it turns out that in these stories of these people's memories, you will find out that this was their home, this is where they grew up, this was their school, and they tell you stories of their school life pre-war, and it's amazing. And it's also very important to know that there are places which are not there anymore, and so we have to reflect on the void. And maybe you live somewhere and you have no idea that this parking lot used to be a synagogue, but there is no trace of it whatsoever. And then you have a person who will tell you that, okay, this is where we went to, this is where I was playing with my friends every Saturday. So this is, yeah, it's very important. So this is how it all came about. We had the peer guided tours, and then these guys just grew up, you know, and then we had to find some other solution for that. And the idea came about to include short clips of testimonies into the walking program. And we had a 2-year piloting phase where we developed an application that we used and tested, and it worked fine. And then USC Shoah Foundation kind of took the idea and developed a very fancy application at the end. This is what you will see today in the phone application. And as of this week or last week, this got back to us, so this is going to be Zahor iWalk in association with USC Shoah Foundation from now on, so that is something very important and interesting. This is how it looks like. It's a testimony-based, interactive, digital, local, historical, non-formal educational program. This is something to stress. We developed it as an educational program. For the future, there might be ways to open it up for the general public, but this can be used by the general public as well. There are reflective questions which you will see, but it's great for people to think a bit about these reflective questions. They don't have to be students for that. At the moment, we have iWalks in 17 countries, and there are 82 iWalk programs and in 13 languages, so it's quite an international experience. And the ways we can reach and we can discover the places are through different ways. One is when we just look at the local history. So this is kind of like a linear way. This applies usually for smaller towns where you will just guide the people from the pre-war times, memories, recollections, family stories. Then you will talk about what had happened to them, if there was deportation, if there were ghettos or something like that. Then they would report it, and then what happened afterwards, whether they came back, and so on. So there is this remembrance part of it. So this is usually discovering Jewish heritage. As of now, some of the iWalks have different topics, not only Jewish historical topics, and in the future we might be able to open it up a bit more towards different directions and new ideas and questions to include into the stories. We can have iWalks, so we have iWalks which relate to a very specific location, such as a memorial site. So for example, we have the Mauthausen Memorial, or we have a very interesting walk and the Schindler's Ark, which is the factory where Schindler saved 1,200 Jewish people, where there will be, or there is already, a small museum that opened up, and we just guide them through at the specific location. And this is where we really stress the importance of remembrance and how we address that today. And we can have these thematic iWalks, which would explore a specific theme, such as we have the Jewish resistance in Amsterdam, very, very small but super rich topic. And I have to mention that each and every iWalk was developed in partnership with someone who is a local partner, so they know their need, they know their audience, this is very important, and they know how and what to explore. So, for example, the Jewish resistance in Amsterdam came from the partner, and it explores it beautifully and very, very interestingly. And then, for example, the Jewish refugees in Lisbon, super specific topic. Portugal was not part of the war in this sense, as all of us were, on the other side of Europe. So there were refugees, and the local Jewish community helped these Jewish refugees who were passing through the country, and we are exploring that topic. And the structure of the iWalk, you will have a map that you can follow your way on, and there are testimonies included, as mentioned already. And there are reflective questions, and this is very important, that these questions will never be yes/no questions, or we don't ask the participant to tell us what was the color of the t-shirt, but much rather something to unpack meaning, think about it, try to explore, and so on and so forth. So now we will show you a small piece of testimony from an iWalk at the Shoes Memorial by the Danube in Budapest, which is a specific memorial, a location where Jewish people were shot into the Danube, where when the Nazi party took over power in 1944 October, and they raided protected houses where Jewish people were thinking that they were safe, and they just herded them out to the Danube, which is in the middle of the city, and they shot them into the river. So this will be a not very easy piece of testimony, but still it's an important piece of history, and we will look at it together and just think about it a bit, and then you have an idea about the length of the testimonies, the types of the testimonies that we use.
Szent István Parkba sorba állítottak minket, kellett tenni a csomagot, és akkor levittek minket minden csomag nélkül a Dunapartra, sorba állítottak minket, oldaltak a Dunapartra, és elkezdték agyonlőni az embereket, lehetett hallani, hogy ott lövik az egyemeket, a sor hosszú volt. És hogy közelednek a lövések, és magam mellé nézek ott az anyám, és belenézek a Dunába, és azt mondom, ha ide kerül ránk a sor, beugrom a Dunába. A számomra az a döntés, a Duna zajlott, én ebben mereven néztem a Dunát. Zajlik a Duna, hallom a puskaropegést, ugrok. Mikor kell ugrani? Nem törődtem az anyámmal, akit előbb lőttek volna agyon, mint engem, nem törődtem. Csak az, hogy ugrik az ember a Dunába. Nem került ránk a sor. Visszavittek a házba. Különben elég sokan ugrottak a jégben, volt, akinek sikerült átúszni a zajló Dunán. Több neurózisom volt ennek következtében később. Ezek közül az egyik ezzel függött össze, jóval később. Ez már a 60-as években volt. Nem tudtam átmenni a Duna fölött, mert vonzott a Duna, és azt mondtam, hogy is be fogok ugrani. Úgy éreztem, nekem muszáj beugrani a Dunába, kényszeres érzésem volt, be kell ugranom a Dunába. Nem tudtam átmenni, felszálltam egy villamosra, nem mertem átmenni.
So it's a piece of testimony that they watch at the end of this iWalk, which is specific to the location. And if you have any words, you're welcome to share about the importance of this piece of testimony when you watch it and the location. So how does it add to your understanding of the events or of the place where you are standing at?
Well, I can't say I like it in the sense of liking something. I think it's very powerful in conveying a story that hasn't ended, but the effect of the experiences is still there. And I think that's a very crucial part in teaching about the Holocaust and persecution, to showcase that people who survived. It doesn't mean that it's like, a Walt Disney story. There's something there that doesn't go away. So I think it's brilliant, especially for young people.
Thank you. Any other thoughts?
Of course, this clip is a very strong one, and we don't use this iWalk with every age group. So it is more for students in the last year of the secondary school or university students, because this location is so heavy that it can be very traumatizing for younger students. But there are many elements of this clip, which is, so for example, we can get to know the later effect of a trauma, which, so we usually don't think about it, or students don't think about it, that, okay, the Holocaust happened this and that year and it's over. No, it's not over. So it can impact on life at a later time. I think it's important that these deeds were executed by the Arrow Cross members, so Hungarian Nazis, not the Germans, which is a very important topic in Hungary, or it should be a very important topic. So it's a short clip, 1 minute, I think, and there are many elements we can discuss or we can make the students reflect on.
And one more very important part is that when you ask the students that the Holocaust happened, and it comes to their mind that, okay, it happened in Auschwitz or in Bergen-Belsen. But what happened is it's in the middle of the city where they live, or it happened there. And I think this is very important, that it has a long-term effect. And it's the same bridge, it's the same tram that they use, they go to school with, and it's just a new perspective, a different layer of meaning. And
actually the memorial is at the leg of the parliament, so a very iconic building of Budapest. Yes.
Just a question, in this case, was it the place first, where you found the testimony and matched it? You know what I mean?
We'll tell you, it's the first place, and the way you do it is you set the learning aim. When you develop an iWalk, is the first thing. You set the goal, the audience, what is your target audience, and then you have a location. But for example, in Amsterdam, we had, okay, this is Amsterdam, and how are we going to approach it? We have an idea, but then you start to look into the testimonies, and it will guide you many, many times. That you probably even change the route of your walk because there is something that pops up in the testimonies. So it really goes hand in hand. But
it's
in
a long work.
So in this case, if it's a memorial, then you go to the location, and this is where you find interviews which are relevant to the location. So that's why you have the indexing terms, and this helps you search the archive.
And of course you find some interesting element in a testimony, but then you want to listen to the whole interview because it's so important. So even if you use just 1 minute of the testimony.
Yeah, so this is related, the next part, to your question a bit. The way we use the testimonies in an iWalk, that it should relate to the theme or the location. So this is the main part, or the most important part, and they should be short, as you said, as you saw. It's like 1 minute, 2 minutes, and because the attention span. And obviously today, when it's TikTok and so on, like students cannot watch videos for so long. And it's important that they should not be too graphic or too emotional. This example we showed you, it's a bit...
It's not a good example for this.
No, I don't say it's not a good example, but this is because of the location is very, very tragic. Mm-hmm. There is no way you should show it somehow. But these are complex, and we use different testimonies at one town or one location most of the time because of multi-perspectivity. And the short biographies are provided always, so students learn more about the people. The questions we ask are reflective questions, as I said already, and sometimes we use pre and post questions, so something that prepare them before watching a clip to think about related to the location or the clip that they will be watching, and there can be post questions which help them reflect, help them understand. But it's not necessary to have both of them, it's not necessary to have any of them, so it's always, it depends on the learning aim. I cannot stress this enough. And of course the questions aim to help this self-exploration and diving deep into understanding the location. As I said, it's not only for students, very good for adults to think about these. And the pedagogical goals.
Yeah, I don't want to elaborate, don't be afraid but I would like you to see that there is a serious methodology behind these educational materials, iWalk or any other testimony-based materials. So it's one of the important things that we want to localize history. We want the students to understand that the Holocaust happened here and with people just like us. So it's not some distant thing in history, and it's a very good tool for this. We want to connect the macro and the micro history, and we would like to strengthen their motivation or increase their motivation for understanding and analyzing the Holocaust and connecting the past to the present. We have researches as well for this, so we know already that when we use testimony-based educational materials with the students, it can develop their empathy, their critical thinking, they can be more active in their society or social circles than before, and every other research or the newer ones support this idea. So that's why it's so important to make the teachers understand that this is a very useful tool, but we have to use it wisely and for the good reasons. It is the aim of these kind of materials is not to teach the students data, years and events, like in a textbook, but to give a deeper understanding of the events and to develop their certain skills, which can be used on other fields as well of their life. So this is very important. I have to say, okay, and I think that we can skip to the next part because of
maybe
the time.
Practice, the teachers.
Okay.
Role.
So usually these materials and the iWalk is very interdisciplinary. So not only the history teacher's duty to do or to conduct these programs or projects with the students, but in any other subject they can be used. And of course the best is that if the students use the iWalk application, there is a reflection lesson after the iWalk. So even if it can be used, it can be done without a guide, so to say, and during COVID we used this iWalk that the students had to do it from their living room because we couldn't go anywhere. but it's good if there is a reflective lesson with the teacher after the iWalk, and usually students have many questions and they think things ahead, so it's very important. And we have some activities, for example, the 6-verse story, which is a small activity, and it can be used after the iWalk, and it strengthens the reflection on these things. Okay?
Yeah. So the role of the teacher is very important, even though it can be a self-guided tour. But yeah, you can prepare the group, and you have to prepare the group. And whenever you go with them to a walk, it's great if you look at the walk before and you know what is the content. And this is what you were going to do now. So we would like to ask you to scan the codes. The right one is for iOS, the left is for Google Play, and I hope you can separate the two by zooming in. If not, just come out and scan. So it's free to download. It doesn't take up too much space on your phone, so please let the Wi-Fi work for us. And if you downloaded it, we would like to ask you to go to Belgium and download the iWalk called Hidden Children Survivors of the Holocaust in Brussels. And the downloading will take a few seconds. And you'll see there are different languages that you can select from. And there will be the question whether you need to send your answers to your teacher. Say no. You can also say yes. But then I would need to give you a code, which I'm not going to give now. Although it could be a good experiment too. But now we will just discuss the question. And we are not so many. But I would like people. Do we want them to look at only one stop, or everyone?
At least two, I think. No, in two groups.
Okay, so this part of the you will look at stop 1 and 2, and you will look at stop 3 and 4. Okay? Or please look at don't stop 3 and 4. So you have an idea, but you can cheat. You can also start with stop 1. Up to you. So you have a few minutes, and you can watch the testimonies, and please watch the testimonies. It will be a bit loud, so if you have headphones, use them. If not, you will listen to each other a bit. So you have like 10 minutes to explore, and then we'll have a discussion about the experience.
So you don't have to go through the whole iWalk. You can do it at a later time, so after the session, just not for now.
Yeah. slowly we can travel back from Brussels to Sussex. And it was just a glimpse into how it works and a glimpse into how students worked with it during COVID, for example, when they were not able to go to Brussels or to Budapest or wherever. So what were your impressions, first impressions? Now it's the time for discussion. And we have some questions, but first is the impression. What do you think?
I think it's very nice. It's very, how to say, it's, you almost feel it could be you. It's very, it just happened to them. They just had a normal life as we all had, and that makes it, I think, maybe more impressive that it's. To realize that it could be you also when children or teenagers see this. They see just, older men, but used to be boys living the life they also live in a more modern way, of course. But, so I think that's important, that it's relatable or something, yeah. And it's also smart done because the questions you ask, you really have to see the video. You can't just skip the video and answer. You really have to listen to it. So there's something a bit long, I think. So I hope the teenagers, what you told yourself in this age of TikTok, they really keep their attention to it. But
I think you raise a very important point, especially when today we are in VR, AI, whatever, and these are simple video testimonies of older people, but they talk about their experience as children, so it can be relatable for the students, and I think this is very important. So it's not talking heads, as you say, it's not about that. And they could become talking heads if there was no questions to help them understand that they have to watch the testimony to be able to answer the questions. Yes.
I found the testimonies, I have exactly the same impression, but I think also the sense of home and belonging that particularly the first clips expressed before the disruption is very powerful, and this kind of underlines this could be me, because someone who walks their own streets and hears from a companion who could be your neighbor, who could, belongs there just as you do. Yeah. That's a very powerful thing to convey.
That it's your hometown and it can be your neighbor, yes. So obviously we don't want students to feel that it could be me because they are sitting in these warm rooms or the air-conditioned rooms or standing there drinking their Coca-Cola, so that's probably not the intention. The intention is to understand and be empathetic, of course, but you cannot, say that, okay, what would you do if it was you? Because you cannot think about it, but you can understand their perspective, and you can relate to it, and that is the intention, that is the learning game.
I was thinking about the technology. You're using Google Maps as the base. And I think mapping is a good way of storytelling in space. Most of us can convey European cities in our minds. So it kind of works, not really depending if we have exactly been to that European city or that street or not. Nonetheless, I wanted to ask, because that really came to my mind first time, did you experiment with Google Street View? To have, especially when you do that walk from a distance, because you have the potential to do the walk from a distance and not to be at a space, especially when the walks are not only about
one specific place, but in combination with a topic like hidden children in Belgium, Jewish resistance in Amsterdam. So I was kind of wondering, can we even enhance this spatial experience by potentially including Google Street View?
Yes, there is another iWalk called Virtual iWalk, which is a desktop version, and USC Shoah Foundation has its educational platform called iWitness, and those are activities or iWalks, like virtual iWalks, that are accessible through the desktop, and it includes Street View, and it connects long stories of huge distances like the kinder transport experience and more. So this intends to connect different locations in the world, and that is a Street View that drops you down and the location of now, so today, and then it can be matched with archival pictures of the space. So yes, there are options. We were also exploring this idea in another walk in the Czech Republic, Brynjanec, where the Schindler's Ark is, of the story of Otti Berger, who was a textile designer, and she was born in then Hungary, today Croatia, and she went through the whole of Europe, and we follow her steps, and it's a mobile application. So the map there is of Europe, and you just go in one stop to a specific location, and then you go to the next one, but you obviously are not able to walk those distances. So that is something that you can do from home. But the other walks are obviously intending to bring you to the very location, like Michel when he talks about his home, and you are standing in front of that house where he was taken from, or where his stuff was before the war.
Yeah, but I actually think it would be very powerful to have that in a kind of Google Street View perspective, so that I can sit in Berlin and walk that path in Belgium, either in preparation of going there or when I can't go there myself. But then I see the house that I can't see when I'm looking at the map.
You can see the picture of the house, so it's the stop, the main photo of the stop, the cover of the stop, is the location where you have to be, especially for this reason, that you want to see what is there today. So you look at the picture and you stand in front of the house and, okay, I know this is the location. And then you go into the stop and you discover.
But you don't turn around.
You don't turn around.
You don't have the spatial awareness of the moment.
There was a development.
Mapping is really great. It's kind of the next step, I'm thinking.
And future development, open. Back to Zahor. Hopefully we will have the funds to further develop the iWalk application. But for example, in Auschwitz and Birkenau, there was an iWalk which used 360 cameras, so you were able to, you didn't have to be there. It was in partnership with March of the Living, and we had like this 360 version, so you could go through the space with your camera, and there was a survivor talking, and this is how it was built.
Yeah, but it's something to consider. I would like to add to, I think, very important thing, if you may, if you let me. So the first, when you told that it was like it could be me, because these stories about children who played on the street and they had their life. And this is very important because the way of the Nazis was dehumanizing these victims. And this way the students can understand that these victims were not only victims, but human beings who had a life before or even during the event. So it's like giving back the humanity for them. And another thing that you said, or I would like to relate to this, that this part of the iWalk is about the pre-war life or pre-Holocaust life, and it is also very important that students sometimes, or not only students, I think many people sometimes think that, the Holocaust history is equal to Jewish history, and Jewish history is equal to the Holocaust history. And it's not true. So being Jew, it doesn't mean only that Holocaust happened to them. So it is very important also to teach the students that Jews had a life apart and before from the Holocaust, and so I think it's very important to get them understand.
And thanks a lot for your work. You can see that obviously there is a lot of work behind it. I think it's very intuitive, and I also like that it's not too overwhelming, like 60 minutes walk, 5 stations, 3 minutes videos, even a little bit of text, I think. And also with the youth bashing, I think also the youth boomers and every other generation has some extent, a very shortage of attention span, so I don't like children's fashion so much, but I was wondering if you had any kind of evaluation process, like how traumatizing was it, or was it too long, or whatever, before you started, or after you already have them in your iWalk.
So when we had that 2-year-long piloting phase, then that was intended to discover those questions, whether like how long should the testimonies be, what is the best way to build it together, and so we have kind of we have a guideline for developing an iWalk. So you don't want to have more than 6 stops, most preferably, because then it becomes a super long something which you cannot do in like one visit. Or you don't want to have it super text heavy because they don't want to read, they want to look around. Also an addition which sometimes we have in some of the iWalks is an audio guide, so then it helps a lot because you don't even need to read at all. You can just listen to it, look around, experience the space, and then watching the testimony is something where you can just dive into it a bit more. So yes, we had some. The iWalks are not yet measured in with surveys and interviews, but this is for the future. Since again, it's a whore. We measure impact.
My students when we did,
yes.
It's just not a representative survey, of course, but I did the iWalks for many years with my students in their secondary school, and they loved it. So I wouldn't use the word like, but the love.
Yeah.
So
we work with teachers and a lot of and so because of the methodology is strict in a way that it's part of the guidelines. So whenever we work with a partner, we walk them through the methodology, the way you build it, and it's we are consulting them very, very closely. So it's not that, okay, you have the guidelines, goodbye, but we have a back and forth, and it's a long process to develop an iWalk. And yes, we want to measure the impact and evaluate in the long term, so that's in the
Yeah, also thank you once again. I wasn't aware of this application. I think to the stress of my partner or fellow travelers have a new thing to try out in my next vacation. And actually also want to stress that I think the interface is actually really good. Like it's very intuitive kind of to use and with the questions, and it all seems to work very well. However, I want to raise one more question, even though it's maybe a whole theoretical issue. But using the UC Shoah Foundation interviews as the basis for these walks, at least in the tour we looked at, ending on family reunification and message for the future, has this kind of redemptive character, right? That is very often featured, as has been shown in oral history research in this collection of testimonies that ends with the introduction of the family, the post-war survival, the establishment of a new life, and how, is this only the case in this particular walk in Belgium, that there is a good way out of this tour, there's a silver lining, they survive, they build a new life, or is this generally a feature, and how do you address this? Because this is not the story of the Holocaust, right? This is the story of survival, in a more integral sense, right? And is this reflected somehow in your pedagogical concept?
So it's not set in stone, and this is when we work with the partners, and it's kind of their choice consulted with us. And here I think it was so you can always argue for, and then I think this was a nice way to end it, and I agreed with the partner that it's hidden children, it's the children's survivors, and it's nice to have it ended on a note which is positive, a bit more positive, that these people are still around and they live and they have a life and they give the testimony, and I think that's important to stress as well. However, like a Shoes memorial, it ends with the testimony that we saw. So it's always the theme, the content, the partnership, the goal, the learning aim. So these are always the considerations. And so we don't always use these pieces of the testimonies, but people tend to like to end it with some hope. But sometimes it's the future messages part of the testimonies, but sometimes the future messages of the survivors are not positive at all, because they are troubled about the current life events that they are living. And we talk about the 90s, and they had huge issues in the 90s, and they relate to the present all the time. I think that's also very important for students and people to understand that you have to be able to connect the past to the present, and these testimonies help you do that. And when you hear that them talking in the 90s had the current issues which related to their testimony and their reflection of their life and narrative, that will evoke something in the students as well, and they will connect it to their own present. So yes, it can be positive, but it's definitely not in the rules and it's not in the guidelines.
Yeah, and I think it's also important that we teachers or we developers don't have answers to everything. And that was a very important thing to me as a teacher to learn when I started to do this or use these testimonies and educational materials, that I don't have answers to every question and every dilemma and every issue the students have using these materials, and that's okay. I just have to say to the students that it's a very important thing, thought you come up with, and it's very good that you think about it. Think together on this thing. I don't have an exact answer to this. I think it's an important learning.
Can I just ask, sorry.
Yeah.
So I know it's called well, so I was wondering whether you asked this or not, but I mean, there are some countries where there is a level of historical revisionism going on about countries' involvement, engagement with the Nazis, the extent to which it did or didn't happen, trying to downplay their role and so on. Does this, when you're trying to give the individual truths and put the historical context, does that ever prove a challenge to you when you have students who might be hearing things at home or might be hearing things on TV and they're going, well, that wasn't how it happened, was it?
We have another very good project called the Deconstruct Project, during which we deal with facts and fake news and Holocaust distortion and denial. This is a very, very specific question and very important to address, especially today when there are no survivors, or there will be no survivors anymore. So the way we can address it is through the testimonies and through the reflective questions. And if this happens, if there is a student who comes with that, we have the reflection session at the end of the IWalks. And also they can phrase it in the questions. We also allow them, usually at the end of the IWalk, if you still have any questions, you can ask your teacher, you can type your questions here. And yes, we face a lot of difficulties, but I don't know how to answer this question, because then I would be world leader, hopefully, to change the world. Yeah, I don't know.
No, but actually I think that the point raised here is we often have this situation, and I think that comes more to your experience as a teacher maybe. What do you do with students who come with a preconceptualized notion of Holocaust denial, distortion, reduction of relevance? And how do they respond to such an iWalk? If I
I was also, that's absolutely right, but I was thinking, in a way, I mean, there's on the one hand, you can have sort of online Holocaust denial, which is, which just made up stuff, which saying, it didn't happen, but possibly more of an issue would be the attitude of some populist governments that try and downplay individual national roles in the Second World War, but that's coming from government, that's not coming from some lunacy on the internet, and that might be not as quite blatant, but it feels it could be more invidious.
Like the role of collaboration, for example.
Yeah, which is a huge issue in Hungary, of course.
Yeah, so I realised I wasn't happy.
I think it's not
here, yeah. So I think that
but the
it
Shoes
would be
Memorial
good to
iWalk, I
discuss.
think it's very important for this matter because this explains the role of the government that they played in the execution of those Jewish people, which is today often referred to as the government had nothing to do with it and it was Nazi Germany, but it was not. And through these testimonies, when they tell you the story, the experience of Hungarian gendarmerie coming and taking them, that's kind of countering these fake narratives. And this is what we can do. Let's start with the iWalk foundation. And sorry if this isn't
but we can discuss it.
It's very important.
Yeah.
Because it's really an important issue that you now address. And what we see is the limitation when we link our commemoration practice and culture also to national identities. Right? So very often commemoration is anchored to the memorial site, the museum, and these are again dependent on national funding, and this will set the local agenda. Right? So as long as we don't have an organizational structure where we collaborate across the borders outside of these national, religious, ideological interests, we're not going to succeed. That's why we really have to rethink how we can collaborate in this domain to have a lasting impact. Right? So for instance, well, Kevin, you know better than me, we were doing our social work, Kevin and Caroline, in Birmingham. Because the goal was to identify the gas chamber that was built there. There were 2 gas chambers. We found lots of things while I was just pushing the seed, right? That was completely unimportant in that. But lots of things were found, really relevant artifacts, human remains, and so on. But what happens after the whole thing? It just goes in boxes in a museum, disappears to Warsaw. No one knows what's going on with that, right? That's a real issue. And you will see this in all countries, also in Western Europe. Indeed, there might be more of a trepidation to talk about complicity of local organizations, bureaucracies, and so on in persecution. And we're really stuck in this. I will talk more about it on Thursday, but it's a real obstacle. And if we don't look it straight in the face, we're not going to make progress. And there are lots of issues we should be more sensitive to, I think. And also we should dare, let's say, we should also be courageous enough to speak up. Okay? Because right now we find ourselves in a period that we need historians to explain to us that anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism is not the same thing. Right? So we brought it down to that point now. After 80 years of Holocaust education, please, what's going on? Right? So really, we're not doing well. And this is one of the main challenges we have. Anyway, sorry.
I think the Hungarian colleagues can tell us a bit more about the crisis of liberal democracy. I think they have some first-hand experiences and maybe they will share them with us during the coffee break. And I think as far as I'm informed, there is already some drinks and nibbles prepared before the 6 p.m. keynote by Eva Pflanzender. And we have already had the teaser for Thursday's keynote, so I think all of us will attend and listen to what Paul's saying and explaining to us here. But I would like to take the moment now and to thank our colleagues from Budapest for explaining their project to us and raising relevant questions in painstakingly dangerous times with us. And from the perspective of the chair, I would like to thank you again for perfect timekeeping. I was kind of without work. It was perfect to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.